All right, well, welcome back. So what we're going to begin looking at now is looking at some actual nutrition guidelines, and then getting into how we can talk about balancing our nutritional status with dietary intake. So what are we consuming? What energy are we giving off? How are we expending energy? How much are we expending? And things like that, and how it relates to weight, BMI, things like that. Okay. So with nutritional recommendations, there is a guideline called My Plate. Okay. So this is something formed by the USDA, so the United States Department of Agriculture, and essentially it's a recommendation for looking at um, how you balance your diet, or how you balance the contents of your diet, right? So balancing between fruits, veggies, grains, proteins, dairy, things like that, right? Um, so with this, there are general recommendations in terms of eating an appropriate amount of each. You know, there's a um, misconception in nutrition and nutritional spaces that there are single causes for certain things. So meaning, this one food item causes weight gain. This one food item causes weight loss. This one thing will cause you to develop X condition. This one food product will cure X condition, right? And it's not that simple. It's not black and white, right? Nothing is black and white. If you didn't know that. So what this My Plate is recommending is saying, hey, have a balanced diet. Emphasize these whole grains, lean meats, low fat, healthy oils, but also moderation. Right? It's okay if you have a sweet dessert every once in a while. It's okay if you have something that has a lot of fat in it, just so long as you're doing it in moderation, just so long as you are balancing it with other types of things. So you have the fats, but you've also got some protein. You also got some carbohydrates, and you have your fruits and vegetables and so on, right? So don't think in terms of single root causes. This one thing is going to destroy my health if I have it one time. No, it's all everything in moderation. Okay. So with these different food items, uh, grains, proteins, and so on, they all contain different things within them, right? So they've got our different macronutrients, they've got our different micronutrients, right? So the way to understand this is to look at nutrition labels, right, or nutrition facts, right? And so you find this on the outside of basically all food products that you purchase, whether it be pasta or cereal or a soda bottle or anything. It's going to have these nutrition facts, right? So when you're looking at the nutrition facts, kind of the first place to start, um, or at least where I like to start, they're recommending start here. I actually like to start looking at the calories first, right? Saying, what are the calories? And this is per serving. Okay, so for whatever this food item is, it's saying 250 calories per serving. And then I like to say, okay, how many servings are in this particular box or in this bottle or in this bag? And then what is the actual um, size of the serving, right? So meaning in this container, in this box of this food item, whatever it is, we have two servings. So servings per container, we have two. And how big is a serving? Each serving is 1 cup. So in this food item here, we have 2 cups. Okay, serving size is 1 cup. We have two servings, therefore we have 2 cups. So what this means is that if you consume one serving, okay, which one serving is 1 cup, you will receive this number of calories and these numbers for each of these different products, right? So meaning if we have 1 cup of whatever this is, we will consume 12 grams of fat. We will consume 470 milligrams of sodium. We will consume 5 grams of protein. Okay. If you eat the whole box, right? If that's something that happens, and sometimes that happens, then you have to look in and see, okay, if there's just one serving in the box, then these numbers correspond to the whole box because it's the one box is the whole serving. However, if in this case you have two, if you ate the whole box, then you have to multiply everything by two, right? So per serving, 12 grams of fat, okay, but we have 2 servings, right? We have 2 servings per box. So if you ate the whole thing, you'd get 24 grams of fat. You'd get 500 calories and so on, right? Now, these numbers off to the side, these percent daily values, what these represent are a percentage of the raw number of the nutrient that you consume. What percent does that raw number contribute to your overall intake for that particular nutrient based on a certain calorie diet? Okay, and the number calorie diet, it's always 2,000. Okay, it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet, and there's this little asterisk. There's always one down here, and it says percent daily values are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Your daily values may be higher or lower depending on your calorie needs, right? So what this essentially is saying is, if we go back to our fat example, if you are consuming 2,000 calories a day, okay, that's your normal calorie intake per day. If you eat 1 serving of this, you get 12 grams of fat. That 12 grams of fat for your 2,000 calorie diet, that's 18% of the total fat that you need for the day, right? For your daily intake, right? So obviously, this is not going to be exactly 18 for everyone. Some people it's going to be more, some people it's going to be lower. So if you consume, say you're on a calorie restricted diet and you're only consuming 1,500 calories. You're only consuming 1,500 calories. Then this 18%, that's actually going to go up, right? That's going to be a higher number because you're on a lower calorie diet, but you're still consuming the same amount, right? So you still get 12 grams, regardless of what you're, if you eat 1 serving, you still get 12 grams. That's not going to change. But what is that 12 grams? What does that contribute to your overall fat requirement? It's going to be more, right? If you're on a 3,000 calorie diet, say you're an athlete, say you're very active, you run a lot, you swim, you bike, you row, you do something, and you consume more calories, then that 12 grams is going to stay the same, but what that contributes to your overall intake is going to be less. So maybe it's only 12%, maybe it's only 13% of your daily required fat. Okay, so you can't just take these raw numbers and say, oh, if I eat this, I'm getting 18% of my total fat. Maybe, if you're on a 2,000 calorie diet, but if you're not on a 2,000 calorie diet, then that's going to vary. Okay. So what we can, trying to advance forward here. So what we can do now is we can talk about how we can use these nutrition facts and these labels and these different nutrient values and whatnot to look at our energy balance, right? So all this is a balance between intake and output. Okay. Energy intake, energy expenditure. How much are we bringing in through our diet, the things we eat, the things we drink, and then how much are we expending through exercise, other activities. Okay. So what this comes down to is, if you achieve a balance, okay, if you achieve a balance, then you will not have a major change in weight, right? If you are too far one side or the other, if you consume more than you expend, you'll have weight gain. If you consume less than you expend, you'll have weight loss. Okay, so it's a relatively straightforward approach. And so where this comes in is you can talk about body mass index. Okay, so body mass index, or BMI, you've likely heard of BMI. All this is, it's a function of 2 variables, and those 2 variables are your height and your weight. Okay, so really we can only change one of these. Once we are fully grown, we can only change our weight, okay, to some degree. We can't change our height. We're not saying, oh man, I really need to get a lower BMI or a higher BMI, I better grow a few inches, right? That's obviously not happening, right? So we can only adjust our weight, not our height, right? So these are the formulae for this. You can do it in metric, you can do it in English units. Really, what you can look at though is a chart, right? You can look at this BMI chart. So how you read this, you take your height in feet and inches or centimeters, whatever your preferred unit is, and then your weight in pounds or kilograms, and you go to where those meet up and you find a number, right? So general guidelines, anything less than 19 is considered underweight. 19 to 24 is considered normal, so considered healthy, a healthy BMI, which is another way of saying for your height and weight, that is healthy, right? So for your given weight and height, it matches up. If you're over 29, so if you're 30 up to 39, that's considered. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped overweight. If you're 25 to 29, you're considered overweight, a BMI. If you are 30 up to about 39, you are considered obese, and then typically 40 and above is considered extremely obese. The other term is sometimes morbidly obese. Okay, so all these are they're just it's just a function of height and weight. Okay, that's all. That's all it is. That's all this comes down to. Okay, and as we'll see in a little bit, there are lots of factors, genetic factors, lifestyle factors, nutritional factors that can influence BMI and obviously a weight as well, right? So again, you're taking height and you're taking weight. So the way to approach this in terms of, if you need to lose weight, if you need to gain weight in order to increase or decrease your BMI, is to look at it from two ways. Look at it from intake and look at it from output, right? So this graphic on the left, this nutrition label, you can take a guess as to what this is. This is my favorite candy. You can buy it at a gas station or any convenience store. These are peach rings. Okay, I love peach rings. So with this, you can see per container, so per package, it's got one serving, right? So meaning if you eat the entire package, which I've been known to do, if I eat the entire package, that's one serving. Okay, one serving. So what you can do then is take all of these nutrition facts, so the calories, the sodium, cholesterol, carbs, all of these. That's if you consume the entire package, right? Because one container is one serving, one package is one serving. So if I ate the whole peach ring bag, that's 280 calories, that's 15 milligrams of sodium, 69 grams of carbs, lots of sugars, okay? Lots and lots of added sugars, right? So in this case, 54 grams of added sugars, right? So again, if I was on a 2,000 calorie diet, then that would be, from this one package, that would be more than what I need for the entire day. Right, that would be 108% of my daily sugar intake of what I need if I was on a 2,000 calorie diet. I got it in one single bag of peach rings. Okay. Obviously, again, if you are above that calorie diet, if you're below it, then that number is obviously going to change. But with this, there's a lot of sugar. Right, there's a lot of sugar in it. So that's one way to approach it. Again, calorie intake, nutrient intake. The other is to look at it from an expenditure standpoint, right? So burning calories, right? So this was a race that I did a while back in March, and so it was a 25K, so it's in between 15 and 16 miles, so a little bit longer than a half marathon, but it was a trail race. Okay, so lots of elevation and incline and rocks and gravel and mud and all that fun stuff, right? And so you can see here calorie expenditure, and again, this is a rough estimate based on my watch and all of my other data, was a little over 2,100 calories. Okay, so the idea here is you can think about, if I need to lose weight, if I need to gain weight, if I need to adjust my BMI, is it easier for me to go run or swim or cycle or kayak or do whatever to burn those calories off? So you can approach it from that, but you can also say, okay, I just need to cut back on my diet or cut back on consuming a particular food item, right? So peach rings maybe, or maybe it's soda with lots of added sugar, right? So you can approach it from these two different perspectives, okay? So let's do some BMI practice here. Okay, so some BMI practice, right? So first one, you have an individual who is 5'3", and they weigh 50.9 kilograms. Okay, So they're 5'3" and they weigh 50.9, 60 kilograms. So what you can do here is come down here, 5'3", right? So here's our 5'3", go over to 50.9. So here's about 50.9. So we're going to come down 5'3". So we're somewhere around maybe 19, maybe 20 or so. Okay. If we do another one, somebody who is 77 inches, right? So 12 inches is a foot, so we've got 72, so they're 6'5", right? So we come down here, 6'5", and we go over to 110 kilograms. So where's our kilograms? So kilograms, we're at 110, and we come all the way down, and we're at 6'5", so we're somewhere around 28, 29, right? Is kind of where we're hovering, right? And so again, this is a chart. It's relatively straightforward to read. All you need are, again, height and weight, right? Now, this here is talking about estimated energy requirement. So essentially, this is a way to determine, it's a way to determine physical activity levels. And then on the next slide, I'll show you how you can plug that in and use it to determine or approximate energy requirements, right? So what this is saying, here's your activity level, here are ages, and then boys, girls, and men versus women. So you've got very active, you got active, you have low active, and you have sedentary lifestyle with a description of these. Okay. So here are moderate intensity activities, here are vigorous intensity activities, and you can see here, so for very active, this is an adult in the very active category who spends at least 2.5 hours per day in the moderate intensity, or an hour 25 or 1.25 hours, so an hour 15 in the vigorous activity here. Okay. So based on that, you have these PA values. You've got these physical activity values, and what you do is you take those physical activity values and you plug them into these estimated energy requirement prediction equations. Okay, and so you plug it in here. Again, most of these are other constants. You plug in your age, you plug in your weight, and you plug in your height along with the PA value that you get, and you end up with some number. Right, you end up with some number, and that's your estimated energy requirements for the day, right? For the day. And so we need certain calories, or a certain number of calories, for various reasons, including in order to produce energy, also because just at our baseline, when we're not really doing anything, we're expending energy, right? So we have this basal metabolic rate at which we are burning calories just to keep ourselves alive, right? So just as a normal part of our metabolism, right? It also takes energy to break down food, right? So this is called the thermic effect of food, the amount of energy required to digest, absorb, and metabolize our food, right? And then obviously physical activity, right? So if you are highly active versus moderately active versus not very active at all, you're obviously going to have a different energy requirements. With athletes, individuals who are highly active, they run a lot, they play a sport, those individuals needing more energy compared to individuals who are not as physically active. Okay. So with this idea of being active and needing a certain number of calories, you can talk about bringing food in. So we can talk about our diet, we can talk about appetite and hunger, right? So appetite is this desire for food. Okay, the desire comes from various reasons, or from various triggers. So think back to our different phases of digestion that we've talked about in a previous lecture. You see food, you're at the restaurant and somebody brings out the plate of fajitas, and you see it and it looks really good, and so you begin salivating. You hear somebody talking about food, you smell food, right? This was all the cephalic phase of digestion, and that's stimulating our desire for food, right? Now, that's slightly different than hunger. Hunger is a need for food, a physiological need for food to bring in some type of nutrient and then break that down ultimately to make our energy in the form of ATP, right? So this hunger, this appetite process, these different desires that we have and needs are regulated by different hormones, right? So one of these is ghrelin. Okay, ghrelin. So ghrelin, the way my professor a long time ago described this was ghrelin makes the gremlins growl. So meaning, it stimulates your hunger. Your stomach starts growling. You have this anticipation. You have this desire for food. So ghrelin goes up to your hypothalamus and it stimulates this region in the hypothalamus called the arcuate nucleus, and it stimulates hunger. Right? It's stimulating this appetite, this need for food. Right? On the contrary, on the opposite side of that, you've got leptin. Okay, so leptin is released from adipocytes in response to being full, to having fat in our adipocytes. So we increase this leptin secretion, and what does it do in the hypothalamus? It's stimulating a decrease in energy intake and increases in energy expenditure. So in other words, it's decreasing our hunger, this desire for food in the form of appetite as well, right? Now there are variations in the leptin receptor, and some of these have to do with genetics. So some people's genetics cause them to have a different shape of the leptin receptor, such that when leptin binds, it doesn't bind entirely, or maybe it binds awkwardly. And so these individuals have less of this dampening or this decreased hunger appetite that can ultimately result in weight gain. Okay, so again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not black and white. It's not, well, just decide to eat less or decide to eat more and you'll have weight gain or weight loss. There are lots of other physiological factors, there's societal factors, there are certainly socioeconomic factors that influence weight gain, weight loss, obesity, things like that. Okay, so we can't really talk about this idea of weight gain and loss and hunger without talking about Ozempic, right? So this is kind of the hot thing in the current news. It's everywhere, right? So people you talk to, you see it on the news, you see it in articles, there's research on it, it's everywhere, right? So Ozempic, or semaglutide, and there are other related molecules that are acting as, or what they are is there's something called GLP-1. So GLP is something called a glucagon-like peptide. Glucagon-like peptides mimic, and we produce them in our own body, in our gut, but in response to eating food and our gut being distended and stretching after eating, we release these glucagon-like peptides, right? And so what Ozempic and Mounjaro and all of the other semaglutides, what they are is they are mimicking the GLPs that we produce in our gut, right? And so we have GLP receptors in our brain and our hypothalamus, and it's acting to decrease the desire for food. It's acting to make food less desirable, sometimes less appealing, such that you don't have as strong an inclination to consume it. And then what's the result? You end up losing weight, right? And so it seems to be very promising in terms of its effectiveness. There are other potential uses, and so I was listening to a podcast not too long ago, and there's discussions that Ozempic and other related semaglutides may be used for treating substance abuse disorders, right? And so acting in this kind of reward feedback loop in our brain that makes us desire and want to continue consuming something, doing something. There are receptors for GLPs there, and the idea is that it can decrease our desire for whatever that substance is, whether it be alcohol or gambling or drugs, whatever it is. You may be able to kind of decrease that that desire, right? So again, like it is with food. So there are obviously other considerations when talking about Ozempic. One is price, and that obviously influences individuals' access to Ozempic. So it's incredibly expensive without insurance, and so it appears that a lot of the use of Ozempic and other related semaglutides are among middle and upper class individuals, with significantly fewer lower class individuals being able to access it, being able to afford it, and thus use it, right? But those who do use it for obesity, it seems to, and for weight loss, even if you're not obese, it does seem to be promising in terms of its effectiveness, right? And so with obesity, again, we can look at obesity trends. Is it really going down? So this left graphic here are showing all of these various countries here. So United States being right here, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, France is way down here. Whatever France is doing, it seems to be working. They seem to have this decrease in the individuals who have a BMI over 30, so being overweight. But you can see over time from the 1990s up to the 2020, there's been sharp increases, really among most countries, in terms of the rates of obesity. And then this graph over here to the right, what we see here is U.S. adult population with obesity weight by sex, race, geography, age to target here. So this top left one here, this is by BMI, and somewhere around 2021, you kind of start to see this line here, this actual study data. You begin to see it kind of taper off. It's not really going down, but it begins to kind of taper off here, right? And so maybe potentially suggesting that obesity rates are no longer sharply increasing. And there was actually an article and a news story, I think it was in December, this past December, so December of 2024, that showed and talked about how, I think it was for the first time in a decade, that obesity rates had dropped, but they had dropped marginally. It had gone from like 46% to 45.3% or something, right? So a relatively small change, but still a change nonetheless, right? And so maybe that's due to the semaglutides, the GLP-1s. Maybe it's that plus lots of other factors, which is probably the case. So it's probably not as simple as we would like it to be, but obviously there's maybe still some encouraging data there. Okay, so let's stop here. What we'll pick up in our next part with is looking at metabolism, so being after we eat and in between periods of eating, what happens in our body, and then we'll actually get down and begin talking about we're going to talk specifically about glucose and how we use glucose to make energy.